into a little family matter. Looks like everybody's okay. I would like to just take a minute and thank everybody for being here today. These negotiations had a lot of twists and turns, and there was a lot of things going on, and I just personally want to thank the media for being patient and understanding throughout these negotiations. We are officially here today to announce the signing of superstar shortstop Carlos Correa to a 6-year guaranteed contract that will keep Carlos in Minnesota through at least the 2028 season, and an opportunity to keep him here much longer. To my left, I want to make some introductions here. Twins Executive Chair Joe Polad, Twins President of Baseball Operations Derek Falvey, the man himself, Carlos Correa, and Carlos's agent, Scott Boras. We'll hear from Derek first, followed by Carlos, and then we'll open it up for questions. With that, I'll pass it over to Derek Falvey.
Thanks, Dustin. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for being here. Obviously on an exceptional day for the Minnesota Twins franchise, for Carlos, for his family, for everyone here. Before I get to a few comments, I do want to acknowledge a few people who are here. Right in this front row, we've got Carlos's mom and dad who are here. Obviously, Daniela, Kylo, and the newest Twins fan that will be born here in the next few months as well. Carlos's sister here, and then Carlos's mother and father-in-law, as well as his friend Martin Fox and Luis Garcia, and certainly Scott Boras, his representative. So just want to acknowledge, thank you for being here. And we welcomed you into the Twins family last March and in through the season, but a chance to now extend that partnership, that family going forward. So thank you all for spending your time coming here. I want to also acknowledge, obviously, and thank Scott Boras. You know, this doesn't happen. Scott, we've been through a few rounds on this one, going back to last year, through this offseason, through a unique process. Without the trust, respect, and admiration for his representation and what we can do collectively to work together to partner, these things don't happen. And so, Scott, I just want to thank you for the work you put into this and the trust you've put in us and our organization and how we've navigated. I want to thank our whole baseball operations crew, certainly for Thad, my partner in this, Rocco as well, for the leadership of all of our baseball crew coming up with creative solutions to navigate this. There's been a ton of work going into that. And ultimately, I want to thank the man to my right and the Polad family and ownership. You know, through a process like this, it can be long, it can be arduous, sometimes longer and more arduous than you expect from the start of free agency and through it all. This would not happen here today without the support of Joe, without the leadership, without the steadiness and the patience of what he showed and his family showed through this process. That ultimately got us to a tremendous day here today that brings us back together and shows how committed they are to this team, our fans, and everyone in this community and how we're going to go forward and win. And then lastly to Carlos, to Daniela, Kylo, as we said, this is about you, right? This is about your home. This is about your family. This is about you being a big part of the Minnesota Twins for hopefully the rest of your career. That's our view of this. And you know, as I went back and thought about what I said last March when we brought you into the organization, I went back and looked at those notes, and I remember I was talking about the back of the baseball card. You know, we're talking about All-Star, World Series champion, Platinum Glove, and then we talked a little bit about leadership and teammate and who he is on the field and who he is behind the scenes, and it was all things that we had heard about Carlos through others, all the work that we had done. And our baseball ops crew and everyone around it and our scouts and everyone, they did a great job in that, but I actually think we were light. I think we were light on the impact that Carlos could make on and off the field in this community with his teammates, with his staff, with his coaches, with all of us in this organization. And so when we got to the end of the season, we made no secret of the fact that this was about finding a way to get Carlos Correa back to the Minnesota Twins. Obviously, the journey through that process led to some different outcomes along the way. No hiding from that. And when I had a conversation, ultimately when I thought at one point, at one juncture, Carlos was going to end up in a different direction, I remember calling you late that night and wishing him so well. And it was an emotional conversation. It was a heartfelt conversation on both sides. And the thing that I took away from that conversation was how much of his heart was here, how much of him he invested in this organization, how much he cared about us as a group. And ultimately, what's transpired from that point forward is well documented, and I won't go through that part of it. But sometimes in baseball, as in life and everywhere else, fate and destiny come back together, and there's an opportunity that you don't always expect. The journeys are not always linear. They're circuitous sometimes, but they're here, and they bring us back together to the place where we knew was always right for Carlos. Minnesota was always right for you and your family, and we hope that you saw us as right for you, and I believe that happened here today. So with that, I'll pause. We're gonna throw on a jersey here, see how he looks in these new threads, and thank you, Carlos. Thank you.
Fashion Show 2.0.
Yeah. Everybody's thinking it, but I'll say it. That looks pretty good. Now we'll hear from Carlos.
I wanna thank the Minnesota Twins organization. I wanna thank the Pollard family for making this possible. Derek, Dad, and everybody involved. Like you said, last year when I came in, I felt welcome right away from the get-go. I felt like I was part of a family. So throughout the whole process, to be able to communicate with you guys, talk to all my teammates, communicate through the whole process, talking to Buxton almost every day, talking to Miranda and all the guys. Definitely, like you said, my heart was here. So I'm happy we got this done, and I want to thank you guys for that. I want to thank my wife because you're my support system throughout the whole process. You were there for me the whole time, knowing that everything was going to be all right and God was going to put us in the right place. I want to thank my son because these few months. Throughout this whole process, he's kept me busy. Yeah, you kept me busy, yes. And the love of a father, it's something that can be described, as you guys know. I want to thank my father, my mother, because without you guys, I would not be here today. All the sacrifices you had to make growing up, poor in Puerto Rico. When I told you at 8 years old that I wanted to learn English because when I got to the big leagues, I wanted to be able to speak for myself. My Dad for taking an extra job so you could afford bilingual school for me. At such a young age, you took me serious. My mother, for always making sure I had good grades. So you always told me going to a draft, you need to have leverage, you need to have good grades so you go to a good college. Thank you guys for all the sacrifices. I want to thank my mother and father-in-law because throughout the whole season, you guys are with us supporting me, supporting Daniela, helping us with Kylo and our future son, Kenzo. I want to thank you guys for all the time you invest in our family and all the help you guys, you help us with. I want to thank my team, Fox, Papo, all the guys that work with me to make sure that I show up every single day and I'm ready to compete at a high level. I want to thank my agent, the best agent in the game, Scott Boras and the Boras Corporation. It was a lot of challenges thrown at us throughout the whole process, but at the end of the day, he got me to a place where I'm happy, where I feel right at home, where I feel like I'm going to have a chance to win every single year, where we have a really good core of players, and I'm thankful for sticking with me throughout this whole process. I know it was probably the hardest job you ever had to do, but we talked every day, and I felt comfort every time I spoke with you. And I'm happy. I'm happy to be here in Minnesota. I'm happy to be a Twin. We started something special last year, and there's some more work to be done. At the end of the day, we want to bring a championship back to the city, and that's what we're going to work for from now on.
Thank you, Carlos. At this point, we're going to open it up to questions. John Shipley.
Well, I might as well start with you, Joe. First person that Derek thanked was you. This is your first big moment as the guy in charge. How do you feel right now? What does this mean to the organization?
Yeah, quite the first 6 weeks on the job. I'm thrilled to have, I think we're all thrilled. Like everybody, I'm thrilled to have Carlos here. And I think your question was, what does it mean to have Carlos a part of the Twins family? I think, we're here to win. And Carlos is a huge piece to that. And so we are collectively trying to get better and better. And so when we looked at going into the off season, we wanted Carlos to be a part of that, and so that's part of the goal, and so ultimately we landed in a great spot.
Dan Hayes.
Hey, Carlos, there's been so many things you've had to wrap your head around this last month, where you might live, new teammates, new league, new ballpark, all that stuff. What's that experience been like, and especially as you're sitting here today?
Yeah, it was not what we expected going to the off season. Traveling around the United States and going to different parts and getting the whole process done. But we stayed true to the process. I never forgot that I was a father, and I was not gonna let that affect me at home. So I kept my spirits up throughout the whole time. I was enjoying my time with my wife, my son. I kept working out and staying ready. So the whole process was crazy, but the end game was great. I'm happy where I'm at right now, and I'm excited that I finally get back to work. I know where I'm gonna be for a long time, and I can help lead this group of young men to where we want to get.
Over here, Phil.
Carlos, from your point of view, what happened with the Giants? What happened with the Mets? And ultimately, how did things change and bring you back here?
Yeah, one thing I learned throughout the whole process was that doctors have a difference of opinions. I had a lot of doctors tell me that I was fine. I had a lot of doctors. I have some doctors that said, it wasn't so fine. It was shocking to me because since I had the surgery, I never missed a game. I never got in treatment in my ankle. My ankles never hurt. So when the news came, it was a little shocking. But I'm ready. I'm in my mind with the expertise of some doctors, named doctors like Dr. Elitrash telling me that the ankle is great. It's in great shape. Dr. Kemp here telling me that I'm in outstanding shape, even better than last year. He told me so. That mentally going to next season for the rest of my career, I'm going to treat it like I've always treated, just going to compete every single day, give my everything out there on the field, and help my organization win championships.
Betsy.
Hey, I guess this is for maybe Derek and Scott, maybe Carlos too, but can you take us through the last 72 hours or so and how this deal came together?
Derek, you
You can jump in, Scott, but I would say, it was a unique 72 hours, but it's really been a long journey through the entirety of the offseason. For us, we looked at it as we started the offseason conversations with him, obviously had some parameters discussed at that time. As things progressed through the offseason, we knew this could take some time, right? Carlos is one of the best players in the game. He's going to have a lot of choices. We were not naive to that, and certainly he continued to have many choices. But we never lost touch. We never didn't stay in touch, and when things, as Carlos just mentioned, have changed through the course of his journey, Scott was great about keeping in touch with us ultimately as things changed. And as we got to learn more and as we got to dig deeper, the goal at that point was to try and find a way to bring Carlos back and to try to find a way to create structures, contractually and otherwise, that would match a lot of the things that they were looking for that would also work on this end. So, as I sit here today, I'm excited about not just the next 6 years with Carlos, the next 10 years, which is what we set out to do right from the outset. It's structured in that way, it's built that way, and we partnered on what that could look like. But we cement Carlos as part of that core in our minds for as long as possible.
First of all, Joe and Pohlad family want to thank you and Derek and Thad and the Twins organization, because it's been a very cooperative process. Free agency is, Carlos and Daniela, they gave me a narrow list, and Minnesota was always on it. And that sounds like an easy process, but it's a difficult process. And certainly Carlos's experiences here were so welcomed. And the other thing that Carlos knew was that the Twins has this juggernaut of young talent that Carlos, as you know, is the assistant general manager of the Twins as well as being a player. And so his evaluation skills, which are frankly quite extraordinary, knowing the character of the players, he had a vision that Minnesota was definitely a place that he could achieve all of his career goals. When you have physicians that are functional and practicing orthopedists who know players, and the benefit of the Twins was, and we should all reach out to Dr. Chris Camp, who has been throughout this process, maybe the most understood physician of Carlos, because he got a chance to spend a full year with him, examine him before the season, during the season, after the season, and make assessments and do things. And that, I think, was paramount to making great decisions about what the organization should do and the benefit of what Carlos can provide to the winning culture that the Pohlad family wants for the Twins. And I think having that base, it gave Derek and I a very sound foundation to work from. And it gave us a clarity that most organizations did not enjoy, where they did not have the information and the depth of understanding of who Carlos was and what his true medical status was. We're not here to fault exterior physicians and their opinions, but I will say that medicine, and particularly in sport, orthopedic functionality and clinical exam on a day-to-day basis is far more important than an MRI. And I think that foundation and understanding that the Twins organization and us agree upon as to Carlos, and that really allowed the theater for us to put together a fair and equitable contract, put together something that really will allow him to be here for potentially 11 years and be a $300 million player for the Twins when you can consider last year as well. And to do that, you have to have ownership, you have to have very astute executives, you have to have a medical team so that the foundations and the trust of this come together. And that's really was the format. And I will say this, that Derek did not let notice go. He was constantly in communication, constantly calling, because I think they knew, they're the organization that truly knew the leadership value in addition to the skill and what he could mean to a franchise. And Derek, I really appreciate that persistence. That was not easy in the face of a lot of things, and I thank you for doing that.
Megan.
Hi, Carlos. Good to see you. I'm curious, you kind of touched on this a little, but how did you weather just the emotional ups and downs of the last couple of months? Like not thinking you weren't going to be back with the Twins, having these other two deals with teams I'm sure you were excited about fall through, and then ultimately landing back here. It's just a lot mentally, so I'm curious how you were able to kind of persevere through all of that.
Yeah, it was definitely an emotional roller coaster, but as you know me very well by covering me every single day, I focus on the things that I can control, and some of these things I had no control over them, so I was not stressing over it too much, just for the simple fact that I could not control their decisions and what some other doctors said. What I can control is prepare my body every single day to compete every single day, to show up every single day, to help my team win. Those are the things that I can control, and I stress about that. And as you know, I take really good care of my body. I'm very disciplined when it comes to my preparation in season and the off season. So those are the things that I stress about. The things that I can control, I let them up to this man, and he always did what's best for me and my family, and I'm always gonna appreciate Scott's work because it was a thing of beauty.
Dill.
Derek, to get here, two other teams decided that that their risk tolerance wouldn't, that based on their risk tolerance, they wouldn't find an agreement on a deal with Carlos. What made you guys comfortable with the risk tolerance and the parameters that you found?
Yeah, I think what we ultimately achieved was a conversation about some change in parameters. I don't want to speak specifically to other teams' perspectives on this. Quite frankly, I know Scott would probably say this. I would expect this. There were plenty of other teams that were still interested ultimately, but there was a pretty narrow field of teams that I know Carlos wanted to go to. And at the end of the day, we were still on that list, and it was a pretty short group. Other teams went through their process. We tried to come up with a creative solution that would work for us. And ultimately work for Carlos and find that overlap, and we did that. But I think what we learned through that process, and again, I just think back to that conversation I had with him that night, his heart was still here. There was still a draw back here, and ultimately there are parts of the journey that take you different directions. But I think what was clear toward the end, what Scott relayed to us, was how much Carlos wanted to find a way to make it work here. And that's ultimately what we felt, how we would get there. So we felt really good about this deal, the way hopefully it's structured. Ultimately, as Scott just articulated, a chance for Carlos to be an 11-year Twin, maybe longer, right? Hopefully longer. We want him to finish his career as part of this organization.
Dave.
Derek, what did that persistence look like on your end? Like, how often were you optimistic, pessimistic?
The emotional journey of that part, I would say that we just, as this was progressing and ultimately there was a new conversation to be had, this is where I credit Scott and his team and Carlos for and quite frankly, I said this earlier, for Joe, ultimately taking over this role and this opportunity and what he's done. Obviously, he's been a part of our team for a long time. I can think of no better way to articulate the seamless transition from Jim, his uncle, to Joe than what we just went through. Ultimately, going back to March and the contract we came up with, and then the off season. And Joe's been a part of those conversations for the last 5+ years, at least that I've been here. So I expected that. But Joe's patience was matched in a similar way by what Scott and Carlos were showing, but also that persistence and that desire to find a way to get to the outcome. At any point during that journey, any of us could have said, you know what, we've tried, we've gotten to the end point, we can't go any further. But nobody on this dais or part of our baseball operations crew, Rocco, our coaching staff, his teammates, these guys all wanted Carlos back to be a part of the Twins. So we just had to stick with that. In the end of the day, we know how our fans responded to Carlos. We know what he did in this community over the last year. This is a huge moment for our organization and everything going forward. I know we're talking a lot about what transpired in between, but the way we look at it is this is about today forward, about how Carlos is going to be a core member and key leader of this team, hopefully for a long, long time.
Patrick.
Scott, from a distance, it looks like the teams wanted length early, but then they were worried about length when they did am I right? They were trying to keep the cap number down a little bit, and then not the cap number, but the luxury tax down, and then they worried about length when they saw the MRI. Am I right or wrong here?
I think the clubs modernly, particular types of teams are trying to reduce their, competitive balance tax as best they can, and obviously they're adding length and years to the contract, and that substantially benefits certain organizations over others. However, in the fairness to the player, you have to look at the fact that he has to execute a contract, and in one term they want length, and in other terms they don't, and that's where it comes back to medical opinion. This scenario is about a large separation in the orthopedic community about functional fitness and clinical exam versus looking at an MRI. Surgeons who don't treat athletes, but they do a lot of surgery, will look at an MRI and say one thing, and the other doctors that treat patients and look at them, and they find little credence in the MRIs when they've seen dramatic performance, particularly over an 8-year span, and they're going to reward that with functional fitness and say certain athletes have certain pain levels, certain tolerance. There's almost, many orthopedists believe there's almost a Darwinian concept where you actually grow into a formation of your being able to complete and perform. These things are all in the orthopedic community. They will all tell you, but it is a dramatic chasm between how some doctors feel and other doctors feel about the longevity of a player's performance.
Jim.
For either Derek or Scott or anybody who wants to talk us through it, would you just explain the mechanisms that would make it longer than a 6-year deal and what it would take for it to be an 11-year deal?
Yeah, so it's really pretty direct. I know there's a lot of, you can do a lot of unique things in a contract around the later years, particularly around options. So those options in those subsequent 4 years after our 6-year guarantee are triggered by plate appearance thresholds. I mean, Carlos goes out there and plays and plays effectively during those years. Ultimately, he's gonna get to those. And I think as Scott articulated, we all believe that. We all believe that's going to transpire here. And I think what Scott's referencing with the 11 years, when you add in our last season, now you're looking at that. I think that, as Scott's talked about a few times now, this was us trying to figure out, balancing some of the information we have or learn through the process, but also our belief in this athlete, how he prepares, how he goes about his work on a daily basis. I mean, this is no disrespect to anyone else who's in that clubhouse. He's among the best I've ever seen in terms of preparing himself, taking care of himself, influencing others to take care of themselves in a way that's special and different. So I just think that that's all part of the equation here in a way that factored in as part of the dialogue for us that ultimately got us to that agreement that we think works out to balance both sides of that equation.
Dan?
Carlos, last year you got a chance to look at the organization from the inside, and I know you said in October you kind of made a list of things you hope to change going forward here. What kind of impact do you hope to make here during the length of this contract?
Obviously, the main goal is to win, and by winning, I don't mean making the playoffs. By win, I mean winning championships. And I think with the core group that we have, and the right guidance, and the right work ethic, and the right just atmosphere in the clubhouse, we can accomplish those things. When I look at this roster, last year we were in first place for over 100 games, and then the injury bug got us a little bit. But my expectations for this team are very high this year. The players know it. I talk to Byron Buxton pretty much every single day throughout the whole process. I talk to Miranda every single week, Nick Gordon. I mean, you name it, all the players. In fact, when the news that I was coming to Minnesota again broke out, every single player in the roster texted me. And that means the world to me, because to earn my teammates' respect in such a short amount of time and their love, for me, that's just what it's all about, right? So for me, like Derek said, my heart being here, the whole time I was talking to Popkins, who's our hitting coach. I was talking to the players. I was always involved with everything and how we can make each other better, even though I was not formally part of the Twins at the time. But yeah, the goal is simple: is to win championships, and that's what we're trying to accomplish here.
John, wait for the mic, please.
Hey, Carlos. How are you? How you said you were surprised that the Giants balked and then the Mets. Did that kind of come out of nowhere for you? Obviously, you've been healthy for so long. Was it just a real surprise?
Like I said, very surprising, especially because, in 2022, I did 3 physicals. I did one full physical with Dr. Elitrash before I did the physical with the Twins before I signed the deal. And then I did an exit physical with Dr. Kemp again, and everything was fine. So, going into that physical, there was no concerns on my part. My body feels great. I played throughout the whole season. Never felt better. So, yeah, it was surprising. But that led me here, back to the Twins, and I couldn't be more happier. My family's very happy. Daniel is excited. Kylo is going to grow up to be Minnesota nice, which I love. And, yeah, we're very excited. I get more juicy Lucy's also.
Patrick.
Carlos, have you made peace with the right center field wall? I saw you give it some dirty looks last year when you
You know me very well. You've been watching.
When you killed the ball a couple of times, but they're not going to lower it for you or anything?
We've had some conversations about it last night, actually. We'll see what happens, but we talked about it for sure.
John.
Question for Joe. Joe, in your first 6 weeks, you just oversaw the biggest free agent signing the Twins have ever done. Is that a sign of things to come?
We'll take that on a case-by-case basis. So, no, I mean, like Derek said earlier, we're in constant communication, and we're always looking at ways to make our team better. So, if those opportunities come forward, then we'll evaluate that then. So.
Hey, Scott, Carlos said early on that this was probably the toughest job you've ever had to do. Can we take probably out of that equation? Like, all the free agent sagas you've been a part of, would this rank number 1?
Well, my job, it's a privilege to represent a player who has a skill level, but really having the aptitude, the attitude, and the leadership qualities of this player, it's like you can't do a good enough job by expressing as an advocate what that means to a franchise. The great thing about this situation was I didn't have to say anything, because I always remember I got a call from Thad and Derek, and normally when a lawyer gets a call in the afternoon in the middle of the season from executives of a team, usually it doesn't go well. But they called to say, you know what? This man is a superstar talent. But the leadership quality, what he means to the organization, what we feel we can execute with him is something that we didn't even know, as studied as they are in the game. And so there was that recognition point made this process something that was conceivable. But the most difficult part for me in the process is that teams employ medical experts. They have to. They need judgments. And the problem I have is that judgments need to be made in a proximity. And if you're not in the proximity of the athletes, if you're not there day to day, and there's reliance on judgments that are the exterior to the athletes, and then I can't address the issue that's ongoing in the medical community, in the orthopedic area, where you're making judgments, the crystal ball approach about the future, which affects players' lives. And that's the frustration level, is that the medical community of those who are closest to the athletes, who are similarly trained, similarly gifted in their abilities to practice a specialized area of foot and ankle, there's just this reliance on something that's so distant, an MRI, rather than the functionality and clinical exam on a day-to-day basis. That was difficult for me, because you watch a family go through this, and frankly, you watch organizations go through it, because they would like the exams to be favorable. They want to execute what they believe is, and so this is something that the medical community, in my mind, needs to sit and make judgments. And the reality of it is, those allowed to make judgments need, in my mind, need to have the proximity of the treatment of the player being direct rather than indirect before they can be relied upon to make those judgments. And that, to me, has been the most difficult part. One of the great parts of this, though, is to see the performance of a player, his execution with a team, and to see a team then reach out and know how important that is to them and what it means to them and their understanding of the game and of a player, because that honors a player. And I'm so glad that Carlos and Daniela and their family got to know that a team really, really, truly understood and trusted a player for things well beyond his skill, and to have a physician that worked with the player year in, year out, make an opinion that was truly his own, truly based upon, I think, facts that a lot of doctors didn't have to get this deal done.
Jim.
Other than that, I'm not frustrated.
For Derek and Assistant General Manager Correa, how does this signing affect your pursuit of other players in free agency or via trades? Does it limit you in any way, or does it embolden you to go out and get somebody who makes a big difference now?
Yeah, I'm afraid to defer to my assistant GM on that comment right now. But no, I think Joe just touched on this. We never view our job to be an end point, right? Even into and through spring training. So that won't change, right? Our pursuit. I think what's clear to us is by adding Carlos back into the mix, we think obviously that's a significant impact on this year's roster. You know, what are ways we can continue to explore ways to continue to add to that roster? We've made no secret of that being our goal and our mission through this process. Obviously, free agency this year, in a unique way, sped up maybe more than it had in previous seasons. So from a free agent market standpoint, not to talk to specific players, as we look at our roster right now, Carlos alluded to some of them, we feel we have a lot of real depth there and a lot of good players already on our roster. I'm not sure there's that many opportunities out there via the free agent market for us to make that group better. But that said, it doesn't mean we aren't going to continue to think about ways to be creative that could help improve our roster in different ways, whether that's through trade or otherwise. So I would just say we don't have a clear-cut next step on that, but we'll continue to work likely up and through when we get to Fort Myers.
I know Scott's going to join our medical team. So.
I think Kylo's getting close to wanting to see Dad, so maybe time for just a few more. Phil?
Derek, all credit for staying in touch aside. No one could have predicted this convoluted path. I don't imagine this was part of the strategy. To what extent do you feel lucky? And conversely, was there any inkling on your part, on the team's part, that there might be difficulty with the Giants and the Mets deals?
Yeah, going into the process, I would say that we certainly feel very fortunate to be sitting here today with Carlos, because this was our goal from the outset. How we got here, obviously, as you just mentioned, was a unique journey. But I would say that up until the moment that we heard that about the San Francisco process getting there, we hadn't really had that conversation or hadn't thought about that. But that was a little while back now. From that point forward, I can tell you that Scott, both ways. I mean, I know Scott said that earlier about me staying persistent there. We stayed in touch because there was, I think Dan asked this question earlier. What would have stopped us from potentially continuing that process or that part of the conversation? It was so clear to me then, even when that transpired, that he was very interested still in coming back to the Twins. And ultimately then, subsequent to the next agreement, the same thing came up again. It's a feel, I guess that's just more of a feel thing, and they can speak to it more than anything else because they were on the other side of it, but it felt like he wanted to be a part of this. So we never gave up hope during that period of time that we could find a solution to bring him back. And until that door was truly closed, we weren't going to let that happen. So I do feel fortunate to be sitting here today, but it was always part of our mission from that point forward when we found out there was potential uncertainty around the first landing spot that we figure out a way to bring him back here.
Doe.
Shout it out there.
Carlos, going back to what Scott was saying a bit earlier, through the last month, really people have been speculating about your health, just in the public, and you haven't really had a chance to, without you having a chance to really answer that or speak for yourself in that regard. And this might be fairly or unfairly something that follows you your whole career, the perception or just the perception of how this free agency went. How tough is that for you?
Again, something I can control, right? The perception and all of that. But throughout that whole month, where people were speculating, I was running sprints, I was working out, I was taking ground balls, I was hitting. So it was more funny to me that everybody was just having those speculations where I'm doing all this work and I'm feeling great. But at the same time, my focus now is not on that. This deal got done. I'm happy here, and my focus now is to go out there and play baseball. One of my goals is to, hopefully one day be in the Hall of Fame, and in order for me to do that, I got to play really good baseball for a long time. So I want to do that for the Minnesota Twins, and I want to also, be able, through my great performance, help this organization win championships, and that's my focus now.
Reggie.
Hey, Carlos. So everything worked out, obviously, how it was supposed to, but what do you have to say to the fans who feel like this was not your first choice and this was the third pick for you? Well,
Minnesota was always in that small group of teams that I told Scott at the beginning of a free agency. The whole free agency process is a very complicated process, as we know, and a lot of things happen along the way. But at the end of the day, all that matters is that I'm here. I'm going to represent this city. I'm going to represent this organization. I'm going to do it the right way. I'm going to play hard every single day. I'm going to be out there in the community, helping as much as I can. And all that matters is what I do from this moment forward for this organization. I'm really focused on that. I'm really focused on giving my all. Me and my family are going to be very dedicated to this city, and that's going to be for a long time. So we're very happy and excited.
I think that's a good place to close. Thank you to the four gentlemen to my left for a great presentation today. Carlos, I know we take a lot of pictures of you, but I'm going to ask you guys to stand in front of the table for some more pictures. And then these guys will be available for one-on-ones here briefly after the photo op.